name is Robin, and I'm with AARP Nebraska. I want to thank you for joining us today for the presentation on the DePorres Club, a civil rights movement organization that was founded in Nebraska. We are honored to have with us Eric Ewing. Eric is the executive director for the Great Plains Black History Museum in Omaha, Nebraska. He is also a retired United States Navy veteran. So thank you for your service.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. Eric has a background in higher education, having served as an academic dean and an adjunct professor. He does serve on the board of the directors for the Child Savings Institute, the Stevens Center as the board treasurer, and he's co-chair of the 100 Black Men of Omaha's annual African American History Challenge. He's also on the advisory committee for the Men Against Domestic Violence. Welcome, Eric, and thank you for joining us today.
Robin, thank you for having me. I appreciate having the opportunity to share information about the DePorres Club and the Great Plains Black History Museum.
Oh, well, we're excited to get started, so please, let's begin.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and turn the camera around so it's looking at what everyone came here to see, which is the exhibit, and then we'll get started. I imagine everyone probably recognizes this gentleman here, right? If not, I'll show you a few more photos with him in it. Of course, that is Dr. Martin Luther King. And these are pictures taken from 1958 when he visited the city of Omaha. And we all know about the impact that Dr. King had on the civil rights movement on a national level. But a lot of folks here in Omaha may have never heard of the organization that had an impact on the civil rights movement here. And that organization was known as the DePorres Club. These are some of the founding members at a much mature time in life. We have to my left, Mrs. Bertha Calloway, who is also the founder of the Great Plains Black History Museum. Mr. Danny Holland, he was the student president of the organization. We have Father McClure, who was the Jesuit priest, and we have Dorothy Urey. The DePorres Club started on the campus of Creighton University, and their goal was to address civil rights. But one of the ways in which they wanted to address civil rights, in which maybe folks don't know, is through employment, through economics. Some of the businesses here in Omaha, unfortunately, did not hire African Americans to work for their businesses. And so the DePorres Club thought that was not the best thing. And so they formed a group to help in the employment of African Americans and help create an equity for everyone. So one of the earliest boycott and protests they held was against the Omaha Coca-Cola Bottling Company. As you see here, this particular protest and boycott started in May of 1951 and lasted to June of 1951. Now, I kind of look at that as a great win, because in less than a month's time, in basically a month's time, they were able to change the hiring practice of the local Coca-Cola bottling company. And as this pamphlet says here, Coca-Cola discriminates. Omaha Coca-Cola Bottling Company has refused to hire Negroes regardless of their abilities. This is a complete denial of the American ideal of freedom of opportunity. Refuse to support discrimination. Don't buy Coke. You know, when I read this, I always mention to folks, it's like Coca-Cola would sell us a Coke and a Smile, but they wouldn't allow us to be the deliverer of the Coke and a Smile. And in addition to that, they weren't hiring African-American drivers, male drivers. They weren't hiring any women drivers at all either. Now, this is one of the members of the DePorres Club as he was picketing outside the Coca-Cola company. His name was Mr. Lawrence McAvoy. The Coca-Cola Bottling Company was located at 30th and Spencer Street right here in Omaha, Nebraska. But as I mentioned, it's the boycott started May of 1951 and ended June of 1951 with the hiring of their first two African-American drivers. And this is the newspaper ad from the Omaha Star, which is currently the oldest owned and operated business in the state of Nebraska and the oldest African-American newspaper in the state of Nebraska as well. Now, the one thing about the members of the DePorres Club and why we put this exhibit up during Black History Month was this was a diverse group of students. And this is a photo of them taken back in 1948, of course, when they were much younger. And as you can see, sorry about that. As you can see here, there is Denny Holland, the student president, at a much younger age, Father McCord, and Mrs. Bertha Calloway at a much younger age. And one thing else you can see with this group, this is a very diverse group of students. As you see African-American male students, European-American male students, you see African-American women students, and European-American women students. They were all understood the importance of equality, and so they all wanted to support it, and so they were part of the DePorres Club. Here in Omaha, we had an ice cream company known by the name of Reed's Ice Cream. And in January of 1953 to January of 1954, there was there was a boycott of that company. Now, Reed's Ice Cream was located at 24th and Pratt, right in the heart of the North Omaha community. And these are some of the individuals as they were protesting and carrying the signs. As you see here, the youth were involved as well. The sign says, "Your cooperation can help end discrimination. Don't support racial discrimination." Now, Reed's Ice Cream, as I mentioned, was in the heart of North Omaha, which at that time was the heavily populated area for African Americans. But what they said in a statement was, "We don't hire Negroes, and we don't care if they buy our ice cream." Now, again, they're located right in the African-American community, but then they said they didn't care if we purchased their ice cream. So, I tell folks, that's not to me, that doesn't sound like a sound business model and an organization that wants to stay in existence. Now, whenever I read this particular quote, it reminds me of when my daughter was a little girl. And she came to me one day with one of those teen magazines, and she wanted me to buy the magazine for her. And I told her, I said, "Erica, if you can turn to a page in the magazine where it shows someone that looks like you and I, then I'll buy the magazine." Then I said, "Better yet, if you can turn to a page where someone that looks like you and I, or maybe looks like your mom, then I'll buy the magazine." My wife is from Hawaii. And so my daughter flips through the magazine, and as she's looking, and she couldn't find anyone that looked like her and I or her mom. And so she asked me again if I would buy the magazine. I told her, "Look, if the publisher of this magazine doesn't feel the need to represent us in this magazine, why should we buy their magazine?" And from that point on, whenever she had a magazine that she wanted me to buy, she had it turned over to the page that reflected someone that looked like her and I or her mom. Now, this is a picture of some of the women as they were picketing outside the Reed's Ice Cream. Again, you see the youth involved. And also, during a lot of the civil rights movement, a reason why most of them or a lot of them were led by the clergy was because the clergy, the congregation paid their salaries and kept them employed, where the common man or woman, they had to worry about going to work after maybe protesting injustice and worry about being fired from the organization in which they work at. So one of the reasons why a lot of things were done under the clergy was because they had a protection. And as in this picture here, you have Reverend C.F. Williams, who was the pastor of Zion Baptist Church right here in Omaha, Nebraska. Now, as it says in January of 1954, on January 24th to be exact, I guess Reed's Ice Cream decided that to hire Negroes, and they did care about us buying their ice cream because they hired their first Black employee. That person was Mrs. Virginia Dixon. January 24th of 1954. Now, everyone's heard of a woman by the name of Rosa Parks. I imagine you've heard of her. And we've heard of her boycott down south, bus boycott down south. And that boycott started in 1955. Here in Omaha, in Council Bluffs, we held a street and bus boycott that started May of 1948 and lasted until August of 1954. Now, and again, that bus and streetcar boycott wasn't about where you could sit on the bus or the streetcar. It was more or less about the hiring practices. They weren't hiring any men, any Black men bus drivers, or any women bus drivers either. And this is one of the pamphlets that they handed out to folks. As it reads, the Omaha and Council Bluffs Street and Railway Company, a public service, has little regards for community welfare. They refuse to hire qualified Negro drivers. Don't ride Omaha buses and streetcars. If you must ride, protest by using pennies. Now imagine, why use pennies? What significance does that have? Well, at that particular time, if you paid with pennies, each regardless of what you paid with, each coin had to individually be dropped into the slot so the driver can count it. And so if you had quite a few folks paying with pennies, and let's say you've got maybe 10 or so people getting on the bus or the streetcar at the same stop, and they're all paying their fare with pennies, it's going to take an awful long time. And if it's cold outside like it's been here in Omaha, then that could cause a problem if you're at one of the other stops waiting for the bus to get there. And you might just say, forget it, and go home and use some other source of transportation, which would then long-term have a big impact upon the company and them losing money. This is a photo of some of the members of the DePorres Club as they were handing out the pamphlets at the bus company. And this is another pamphlet as it reads here: the Omaha Street and Railway Company refuses to hire qualified Negroes as bus drivers. You can do something about this undemocratic practice by writing your protest, and then it provides the vice president of the organization's contact information along with his phone number. Now, can you imagine him being bombarded with a bunch of letters and complaints and phone calls? Probably would have impeded him from doing the job he was supposed to be there to do. And then here, as it says down below that, it says, our boys are dying overseas to fight communism. Let's make democracy work at home. Now, just think about it. African Americans were able to go off to war and die for the company, but they couldn't drive buses or streetcars for the city of Omaha. These are a few of the signs in which they carried. The first sign says, Negroes drive buses and streetcars in New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Los Angeles. Why not Omaha? The other sign says, Negroes, GIs, drive trucks, tanks, and Jeeps in Korea. Why not streetcars and buses in Omaha? And the next sign says similar type language. And then I show this piece one more time. This again is Mrs. Bertha Calloway, the founder of the Great Plains Black History Museum. She started the museum back in 1976, the very same year in which Black History Month became a nationally month-long celebration throughout the United States. Thank you. I'm going to show you a couple of other photos real quick. Sorry. Again, this is Father McCord at an older age. And this is Father McCord with some of the members of the DePorres Club as they were marching downtown Omaha. And this is Mrs. Mildred Brown, also a member of the DePorres Club and the owner and operator of the Omaha Star. As I mentioned before, the oldest owned and operated Black business in the state of Nebraska. And that's the tour. Any questions? Well, any questions?
Thank you, Eric. Great information. And to put the pictures to the story, it really helps you to identify what things looked like back then, how it all came together. It's a rich history that I think we should all take time to pause and learn more about it, to know that the DePorres Club started back in the late 40s, like a decade before it really started getting a movement going in other places. And the landmarks that you guys made with that the action that they did back then, oh, yes. It resonates today.
Yes.
I do have a couple questions. Where did the DePorres Club get with their name? Where did that come from?
From what I've been told, it has to do with a saint that of mixed race or something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but someone had when I was giving the tour a few weeks ago, someone had Googled it and they had mentioned that it dealt with the mixed race or something, the saint of mixed race.
Perfect. Just perfect. It's also very interesting to note that the leaders that came together in the community to make this happen. So you had your churches, you had the Omaha Star, and the Jesuit priests who came from Creighton. To see all these leaders that took their stand and made themselves known of why they were doing this and why this was important. The fact that the Omaha Star is still there today, the Zion churches and the other churches from the community that are there, and even their members are still were part of that movement, are still with us today is good to know. I read that the DePorres, and you mentioned it yourself, that they took the stand on the financial aspect and the equality of getting good jobs to the people in Omaha from that area. And so Coca-Cola, 2 months, the Reed's ice cream took a year, and then the bus boycott was a little bit longer, from 48 to 54. But again, it worked. It actually worked where it made a difference, and that was really good to see. The Omaha Star, is it still located in the same location that it's always been in?
Same location, and a bi-weekly newspaper.
Wonderful. And I'm assuming a lot of the flyers came from them, or maybe from the churches. I'm not sure, but again, their advertising, they had it down to an art and a science, which was really good to see in person. Is there anything else that you want to tell us about this civil rights movement that took place before we move on to questions about the museum?
Well, I do want to mention that we do carry the book, and for Matt Holland, Denny Holland's son, who wrote the book, and we do carry the book here in the museum, and we will be having a book signing here coming up. I think I have it set for later on in March or early April.
Wonderful. That's good to know. I did not realize that there was a book.
Yes.
So let me ask you this. There at the museum, you have the display on the DePorres, which is wonderful. Can you tell us what some of your other displays are that you have available?
Well, we currently, right now, where the DePorres Club exhibit is located, we will be moving that exhibit to another space in the museum starting next week, because next week, as we know, March 1st begins, as I like to refer to it, as Women Her Story Month. And so we will have an exhibit focusing on national and local African-American women telling their story. And then we will have the the DePorres Club exhibit currently, where we have the Tuskegee Airmen who call Nebraska home, an African-American exhibit, will be coming down. We also have a two-zip exhibit. It's called Hate and Hope. So it's kind of a yin and yang exhibit. We have the 24th in Glory exhibit, which focuses on the various athletes that have come from the Omaha area and some of the social issues that were going on during the time and when they were rising to greatness to become Hall of Famers and things like that. And then we have an exhibit on display called the Black Citizenship in the Age of Jim Crow.
Oh, very good. You have so many. And that's what I'm excited to find out about, because this is a museum I've never been to. I think it needs to show up on the Nebraska passport card, and I want to come see it as soon as this ability for us to get out and move around to come to the museums and come see it. So let me ask you this. Where is the museum located and what are your hours?
We're located at 2221 North 24th Street, the historical Jewel building, home of the Dreamland Ballroom. And our hours, we're open Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays for face-to-face visits. They have to be done by appointment from 1 to 5, Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, as I mentioned. You can go to our website at gpblackhistorymuseum.org to schedule an appointment. We don't no more than 8 folks in the museum at a time. Temperatures are checked upon entry. Face masks are required, and social distancing is required.
Great, Eric. That's good to hear. So how does one become a member of the Great Plains Black History Museum?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because this month is our membership month drive. To become a member, if you want to do it online, you can go to our once again our website and click on our membership. We have memberships for seniors and students at starting at $10. We have single individuals membership at $20. We have family memberships at $40, and then we have business memberships at $100 and lifetime memberships at $500. And we do our membership drive in supplement of doing a gala type function and things like that. So we try to have folks go that way, and then they're made aware of events and things that are happening at the museum a little bit more in advance other than just the general public.
Perfect. That's good to know. Thank you. So with the museum, how often are you changing your displays or your?
We tried there. We only have 2 permanent exhibits, and those are the Hate and the Hope, and even some of the artifacts change in those at times. But the other exhibits, every 2 to 3 months, we try to have a new exhibit. With Black History Month being in February and Women's History Month being Women Her Story Month being the following month, we then have 2 back-to-back type changes. But other than that, they tend to be every 2 to 3 months we'll have a new exhibit. So that way it keeps folks needing to come back to see something different.
I'm sure you would see something different every time. I mean, I have learned so much today, Eric, and I really want to thank you. And to let everybody who's seeing this, to thank you for joining us today. And for Eric, for sharing the history of the DePorres Club in Omaha and the impact that it had locally on the civil rights movement. So I look forward to the opportunity to come visit the museum in person. And for our viewing audience, if you enjoyed today's session, please like this post or share it on your page to let others know what you've learned. On behalf of AARP Nebraska, we want to thank you for joining us.
Can I share one last thing?
Oh, please.
I almost forgot. Next week, starting next Monday, and for the next 5 months, we will be doing it's called A Legacy of Martin Luther King. We'll be taking a look at 5 of his most famous speeches, and we'll be analyzing those, and we'll be having conversations with that. It's called Mondays with Martin. And each of those speeches, we will talk about them, and we'll do that in the virtual world, have breakout rooms, and it'll be from 12 to 1. And if anyone's interested, they can go to Eventbrite and find it under the legacy, Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy.
And I'm sorry, when does this start again? Just
It starts Monday, March 4th. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. That will be rich with history. Again, something that I'd want to see. Well, Eric, thank you for joining us. We're going to do this again soon.
Thank you. We're happy to be of service.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.